Coming up next, an interview with a legend about a song that came into his head from the sound of his tires rolling over a bridge. He was on his way to record with his famous band, and they were actually expecting him to bring them a song for their new album, but he didn't have one, and he was getting nervous. Soon as he heard that, though, in his head, he kept humming it over and over again. He was afraid he was going to forget it. As soon as he got to the studio, he yelled at the band to grab their instruments, and they wrote the song from the tune in his head in like 2 or 3 minutes. We also talk about the supergroup that he joined years later, that after several hits, the record label paid his band millions to never release another album, and his reaction to my question on That's Priceless. Fun interviews coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. We're going to get right into it today as we jump into another episode of our series, Revelations, where featured artists reveal rare stories about their greatest songs and greatest albums, and we got a great one today. Doing another segment with the great Tommy Shaw from Styx on the writing their classic hit, Too Much Time on My Hands. Plus the fight to keep rock alive in his band when ballads were being pushed. His thoughts on Mr. Roboto, which was one of the things that led to the breakup of the band the first time. And his time in Damn Yankees, including the smash hit High Enough. As well as the multi-million-dollar payment not to ever record again. It's all coming up next. Let's get into it. What dynamic is interesting to me is the rock direction versus the ballads direction. And so that dynamic is always interesting, the push and the pull of the direction, the musical direction. And that started to become a thing here about this time for Styx.
Yeah.
You want to rock. And I think most Styx fans want to rock, you know?
It puts band members in an unenviable place. If their love song goes to number one, they're going to get paid a lot of money. And now they're still in the band. The band may not have, shared in as much of a payday as they have. And you can't help but, feeling like, wait a minute, I was there, I played on it, and I did it. So the monetary side of it is, you got to get over that. 'Cause it's you, babe, whenever. Eventually you figure it all out. That's just commerce. But when you're all out there, doing the same hours and eating the same food and sleeping in the same, places, it can kind of gnaw at some people. But for us, I think we handled it really well, because that's what it is. And I went out and promoted songs that I didn't write, and it was because it's for the band. That's where the power is in the band.
Going into Paradise Theater, that album went to number one, and Too Much Time on My Hands, always thought that was such a great song.
I think I'm expected to be the guy that brings in the rock song, past, experience. So I don't have a rock song. So I'm in the car and I'm going, okay, I don't have any ideas. And something got in my head, and I started hearing, might have been the lumps on the bridge or whatever. And I didn't have any, like a thing to like a voice recorder. So I had to keep remembering what it was. And I finally got, so got it, pulled into the parking lot, pulled around back, and the back door to the rehearsal hall was open. I ran in there and I go, hey, guys, come here. Chuck, play this. So Chuck's playing that, and the rest of the guys, they're such good writers. They started playing. By the time I got there, I went inside. It was 10 minutes at the most, and we had the song.
And it was ready for radio. I mean, that's one of those songs that you hear it, you're like, that's a hit song. There's just no question.
I know. If you're fortunate enough to have whatever's going on in your head, like the lottery. Just those notes come out, and if you have to pay attention to it though, because sometimes you might be in a shower and hear this great thing, and then get in bed and fall asleep, and the next morning you're going, "What was that song last night?" So I ran inside. I said, "Chuck, come here." That sounds like a Chuck Panazzo bass line. And then everybody else, then I would yell out chord changes. It's simple chord changes. But that's how it was. And everybody knows how to harmonize. So my head get away with the sanity. It's two chords. It was very easy for everybody to pick up on it. I had a little short list of lyrics, and that was the chorus. The rest of it, the song kind of wrote itself, because this bar in Niles, Michigan, where I lived, and the Catholic church was right next door, and it got into my head, and that's where it happened. And it turned out the priest, Father Slowey, he liked to come over for a beverage or two. So he wound up blessing, our works.
It is very much different, very different from anything that Styx had ever done. Especially the intro was very cutting edge. Almost had like a new wave funk to it. It was like, but also like a little bit of disco in there. And I know that you were saying that you guys hated disco, but I mean, it was just like this potpourri of different things, this blend of all these different things. That's what made it so great.
Yeah, there was rock and disco on the same plate, and it worked.
It did. And the music video too was iconic, man. It's one of those music videos you remember from the 80s.
Yeah, Jim Cahill was our radio guy, so he and I directed that, and we came up with the band playing horns, and with the it opens up the jacket and there's watches and stuff like that. And Jim Cahill, my partner, who was the liaison and getting the film crew and doing all that stuff, he had a terrible toothache that day. So it wasn't very pleasant for him, but he got it done. It was not the kind of place where you would imagine you would do a video. It was one of those things where we just got lucky. I think a lot of what happens for a band is if you keep doing the right things, the luckier you get.
Well, it has one of the most memorable endings in rock with, whispering the title as a ticking clock comes in, an alarm sound, tell me about that. How'd that come about?
Too much time on my... Yeah, somebody came up with this clock sound. It wasn't me, but it was a good idea.
And Jimmy Fallon and Paul Rudd, when they did the shot for shot remake, what'd you think about that? That was probably a cool surprise.
I was watching a different late night show when that was going on. So I kept hearing people say, "You got to watch Jimmy Fallon, man." Eventually someone said, "Turn the TV on right now." And I turned it on, and there's a guy dressed up like JY. And then, they did an incredible job of dressing. Yeah, Paul Rudd as me was like just hilarious.
But it was a tip of the hat. You could tell that there was a song that they loved, that they grew up, watching the video on MTV. That's when those kinds of things work so well, when it comes from a love and a passion for the music.
Yeah, and everybody was throwing in suggestions. How about we have everybody playing, just sitting at the bar and coming up with a horn, trumpet or saxophone or whatever. So it was a lot of silliness.
What were your thoughts on Kilroy was here and the direction of the band, and all these years later, what are your thoughts?
Well, at that time, we'd been on the road for years, and I think we could have used a year off because it was a hard record to make. And the Kilroy thing that would have been better as a solo project, because it just put a lot of strain on the band financially, personally, and it just I think we could have handled it a lot better. Basically, ended the band for a while. Maybe that might have been it for everything. The other members of the band had to pay for it. We weren't making that kind of money, so everybody there was just a bad feeling in the band. It's like we didn't ask to do that, but it was brilliantly done. Brian Gibson, I believe, was the director, a well-known director. He did a great job.
Charles Kilroy, you have persistently and flagrantly violated Code 672.
None of us were actors.
Right.
We put on actors' clothes and we read stuff, but it was not really not our thing. But we did it.
Come on, let's get out of here, all right?
No, look, this is rock code.
I would say I'd enjoy it if I saw it now, but it was just wasn't what the band needed at the time. It was a hard one to try and put out there for our fans. They didn't. Were like, what is this?
Son of a bitch! Look at this.
Well, we survived it. We were subject to our own falling apart because there were so many different ways that we could go, and we would do it. We could have a hit with it, but it wasn't necessarily what everybody wanted to do. It was like, well, it's going to be a hit. So you don't turn down a hit. Get the band. We just all have to get over it. But the band was just being stretched, and I was part of it. And we eventually kind of took let's take a break.
So your solo album that you released, well, you have quite a few, but Girls with Guns and you and Dennis both released solo albums. I remember buying both of those because I was such a Styx fan. It was kind of cool because you were getting two albums in the same year from the band that you were a fan of. But tell me about Girls with Guns.
Yeah, I hadn't really planned on doing a solo album, but I just needed a break because the Kilroy thing just wrung us out. And then I got a budget to do a Girls with Guns video.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It's a good song. Would have been good for somebody else, I think. And it was fun. I was over in London doing another solo album, and I heard JY was coming, and I was doing this album called Ambition. And so he came over there, and we had really drifted apart. We had disagreements, and he had stayed with more of the band with Dennis because that was how it could stay together. I talked him into coming to London, and I said, "Come over to the studio and you can sing some backgrounds on the thing," and we did that. That was the first time we had been civil to each other because he's paying, JY's in charge of the lawyers and all that stuff. And it was not a fun time for him. But he and I were always friends. So that was just an odd time that we had to get over. We just didn't break up. That was the thing.
The early 90s supergroup, Damn Yankees. Tell me about how Damn Yankees came together.
Well, Ted and I would often run into each other on the road. He was the first big rock concert that I went to when I could walk from my house down the hill to where the Armory was. I could hear them playing about a block away, and it was Amboy Dukes. I didn't have any money for a ticket, so I went around the back where you could hear, and that was my first exposure to Ted Nugent. And then over the years, as the bands were getting more popular and people were having success, I would hear that he's playing, and I would go see him, and we knew who each other was at that point. But it wasn't until record companies were starting to figure out what are we going to do, and that's when we John helped us put Damn Yankees together.
Don't worry about it, ma'am. Just them damn Yankees.
It was Ted and me. I had a keyboard player that I'd been working with, and he worked with Cyndi Lauper. Peter, and Jack Blades comes along, and Ted comes to New York. I had this little guitar thing. I didn't have any lyrics, and so Ted sat down with me, and he did that. I was alone, cruising with the wind.
I was alone, cruising with the wind.
It was what was going on in Ted's life. He was dating Shemaine, his wife now, and he showed up all like new leather jackets, clean, red pants and cowboy boots, and it was like, what's going on with Ted, man? He was in love. And so we sat down and wrote.
You knew damn well I'd come again.
And it just kept growing. At a point, we said, we got to stop adding parts to this song. But it was a fun song to play live.
Well, high enough, I know that you guys were all kind of sitting around doing laundry. Jack Blades was kind of singing the song to himself.
Yeah, he was down in the laundry room, but I'd been upstairs playing something on the piano. Jack was downstairs, and he was singing a melody to it. And so I got up and I said, "Come upstairs. Let's work on this." And we wrote it 5 minutes.
We don't need to talk about it anymore.
But we were afraid to play it for Ted. Well, every once in a while, he would take an electric synthesizer out into his backyard and shoot it with a gun or a bow and arrow. And I didn't want him to shoot my synthesizer. So I said, don't play it for Ted right now. So we played it for John Kolodner, and Kolodner liked it, and John played it for Ted.
Don't say goodnight. Say you're gonna stay forever.
Jack was telling me is how you love someone so much and you don't want to scare them away when you're talking about the next step, that kind of thing. So it came from a different place. Everybody has a different take.
Yes, yeah, that's a good one. I'll go with it. Mostly wanting to get the harmonies right, and then getting the other parts right. And Ted's guitar was a major part of that, with all the whammy bar stuff.
Can you take me high?
And that was really the Damn Yankees. That was it. That put all those things together, and that song really represented Damn Yankees.
That first album was huge, 2 times platinum, a couple of big hits. There were 3 or 4 big hits from that album. And then you did the second album that had a big hit as well, and that one gold. The interesting thing about Damn Yankees is that you guys were offered $1 million not to record a third album. Tell me about that.
Well, no one told me that. But that's probably true, because they knew they were going to lose their ass on a third record. It just, some of those things, that the writing is on the wall. In that profession, they know, okay, we're not going to give them that much money again, because they knew the band was going to get back together with their old bands. And
nowadays, that would be like almost $3 million. Pretty good to just take a check not to do an album.
Yeah, Damn Yankees had really run its course, and you got to know when that's happening, and that's what that was. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Man, I love the new record. I think it's incredible. Circling from Above. Well, everybody raise a glass like that. That's such a feel good song. It's very Beatles-esque. You know, I love it.
Will had a friend out in wine country who had built this studio way out in the woods. He said, just have at it.
Let's hear it again. It's time to raise our voices.
Really, really nice studio. So we got a lot of that done there and wrote the lyrics and sang the vocals, just really kind of wore ourselves out there. It was so much fun.
Well, Forgive is the last song I wanted to ask you about.
Would you stare at the sun?
When I heard the demo of it, it's like, I got to sing that. I want to sing that one.
I'll keep saying I forgive you. Please forgive me.
It's nice to have such great songwriters in the band. We've surpassed our first year of touring together, and we're as tight as ever. We all kind of have the same sphere of beliefs for how things should go, and we support each other. It's just such a great band to be in.
We're the lucky ones. Still it goes on.
We have fun. We don't fight because there's nothing to fight about. We're pretty much in agreement on the things that we want to do, and then we go about doing it.
I love Tommy and I love Styx. Be sure to get their new album, Circling from Above. You can get it right up here at the link, or you can get it right below in the description. Make sure to leave us a comment about Tommy, about Styx, about these songs. What are your memories of these songs? Let's have a great discussion below. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.